Welcome to the NJC's 10-minute takeaway, where we will try and cram in as much information as we can into a 10-minute workshop. I'm Tom Stenson, audit trainer and head of training for the NJC, and today I'm joined again by Lynne Barry, who is current president of the NJC and past chair, a former teacher and an audit trainer. Thanks for joining us, Lynne.
Hello, Tom. You're welcome.
In today's topic, we are going to be discussing teaching and learning strategies, and our time starts now. So with teaching and learning strategies, Lynne, if we think about sort of the competencies on the marking sheet, we've got quite a big topic here. There's 8 competencies within that. Would you be able to summarise sort of into a shorter sentence of what teaching and learning strategies are?
I think so. It's about being client-centered. This is the section that really delves into that. So it's about your skills with questioning and using the best questions that you can at the best time. It's about then giving listening skills and feedback from the listening that you've just done and from your questions. So feedback skills. So really the listening skills, the questioning skills, the feedback skills. I guess most of all what we're trying to do is help a pupil become independent. So in this section, we're looking at, can they actually do these things for themselves, and what can we find out, do they know? In other words, would they be able to deal with that if we weren't there? And unless we're asking these sorts of questions, we're not going to know that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point there, is that even if we, let's put the test aside, it's about helping the pupil come up with strategies that they can implement leading up to their test. So hopefully they're independent, but also what are they going to do post-test? And I think for me, that's kind of that strategies part. So the teaching side of it is for us, and then the learning side is for the pupils.
Yeah, I would agree there. And what we are trying to make are thinking drivers that will continue after a test to reflect. So if we've given them that ability while we've been teaching them, they'll go away and do that. I was talking to somebody the other day who's a PDI, has helped her son get through his test, and then he'd come home post-test, which he'd got, and said to them something about, oh, I had a terrible day, this went wrong in driving. And they reacted by saying, well done for coming home and talking to us about it. What do you think you could have done another time then? Because it was a signal issue. And obviously the learner should really have known better than to trust signals, but reflected afterwards. So, I thought the PDI had done a good job on the training to make her son question himself afterwards and then be brave enough to come home and talk about it, actually. And that's what we're trying to do.
And something we'd mentioned earlier as well was some of the comments that you and I get as trainers is finding that balance between over instructing and under instructing. So something that we'd mentioned was often with our industry, it's about pitching the things in the middle. So sort of finding that sweet spot. And again, for me, that's, as we've said throughout the whole of this theme of lesson planning and risk management, it's about us choosing the right thing at the right time for the pupil. And that goes on then for what they're supposed to be doing post-test, is choose the right option at the right time.
Exactly. And again, I think many ADIs and PDIs think that they're going to be over-instructing if they step in and help. But on the other hand, if they don't step in and help, then the risk increases and they will be under-instructing. So you're quite right, it's that middle ground. And you're going to do what the pupil needs. If the needs of the pupil at that moment is to help them, then help them in whatever way you see best fit to do. It's about as well being, we've mentioned client-centered, and it is client-centered. It's doing what's best for that pupil at that moment in time to support them and help them. Because actually, once you've got them out of the difficulty, you can discuss it further on, can't you? Either on the move or pulling over. But it's definitely about being client-centered and not being client-led. So it's not about what your pupil actually wants to do at that moment in time. If that isn't the best thing, then you need to come in and help. Because after all, we've used this expression before, pupils don't know what they don't know. So if they haven't got the skills to deal with something, even if they think they have, you will need to come in and help. So all of this comes into teaching and learning strategies.
Mm. And from what you've said there, it's about perhaps eliciting feedback from the pupil. If they don't know what they don't know, well, then that's about us helping to educate them. That may be through just some direct instruction. It may be through some coaching. It may be through, let's read this, let's watch this video, let's watch what other people are doing. So we're then using more of those client-centered skills to help the pupil at that time. And it links directly to our last session where we were talking about that risk management. And it isn't just about allowing the pupil to dictate what's going on, because we're in our moving classroom. So the other one that I think I'd like to highlight here as well, which we spoke about earlier, is one of the specific competencies about technical information. And this is one that does seem to crop up when I'm chatting to examiners or when I'm talking to PDIs, ADIs, and we're looking through their reports from Part 3s and standards checks. And for me, this is one of those areas that directly links to our Part 1 theory test and our Part 2 driving test. Because if our technical information isn't there, how are we going to transfer that information across to the pupil?
Yeah, I agree. I get this as well. And even in examiners' feedback, I see places where it says the technical information either was inaccurate or actually there wasn't enough. It wasn't deep enough to help the pupil. One example, I mean, you might have others, but one example is a classic via school, the sign coming up and in roll, I'll say something like, do I have to do that 20? And I'm getting, yes, you do. You do when the lights flash. Well, actually, you don't. You don't have to do it. It's an advisory sign. What
Yeah.
shape is the sign? Let's get the learning in here, but you can't give incorrect information. So, I mean, my suggestion always is to go back to driving essential skills and, start looking through your theory again, because it's easy to forget things and we do need to be giving proper information. I think you said you'd got one where the person just hadn't given enough information.
Yeah, this was to do with yellow box junction, and he explained to the pupil about not entering the yellow box junction unless you're turning right, but didn't finish with the information. And so the feedback from the examiner after was, you should have really gone into a bit more in depth into that, because we don't want the pupil to go away with only half of the knowledge. And I think that's quite a valid thing for us to be recognizing. And it, like with the technical knowledge, as I say, it links to lots of the things that we do. One of the tips that I'd often give to people, because the question comes up, what if a pupil asks me a question I don't know and I'm on my Part 3? So my advice is, don't give the wrong answer. You're better off just saying, actually, Fred, I'm unsure of this, but at the end of the lesson, why don't we research it? Why don't we have a look in driving essential skills? Because at least then you're attempting to give the correct information, and that would be better than giving incorrect information.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. As a teacher, before I ever came into this profession, I was always told, if you don't know something, don't just guess or give something incorrect. Just go away, find out, and say you'll find out, but then make sure you come back next time. I mean, if it's a simple sign and it's not causing any risk, but the pupils asked you what it is, you could always throw it back to them and just say, well, tell you what, Fred, you go away, find out for homework, and I'll ask you as soon as you get in the car next time. See what you can find out, Fred. You can do that. And I agree with you, don't give incorrect information. Although occasionally when I'm training Part 3 people to be confident, I will say to them, I would rather you sound confident at the moment and give me the incorrect information than sound like you're sounding now, because you sound like you're really scared and you don't know. And as your pupil, that's not filling me with confidence.
Mm.
Um, But I agree, really, at the end of the day, if you don't know, then we go and find out. We don't know everything.
No, and I think it sort of makes us seem a bit more human as well if we say, actually, Fred, that's a really good question. I'm not entirely sure of the answer, but let's figure it out together, or why don't you go and research it? Because it allows people to recognize, especially learners, that driving is very rarely perfect. And one of the sort of words that I often use in training is what options have we got? Because I think that links directly into our teaching and learning strategies. One way is not always going to work. So the more options we've got, hopefully the better it's going to be.
Yeah, and that, things change all the time. More modern signs come in, things we've not seen before. Green flashing lights now are on vehicles that are at the side of the road, aren't they? Roadworks vehicles, etc. They never used to be, but you
Mm.
have to keep up with things in order to update your knowledge, and therefore you'll have the knowledge to be able to pass on. So you do need to keep up to date. There may well be some things that you don't know.
Well, that is the end of our 10 minutes. Can I just say thank you very much for joining us for the series on lesson planning, risk management, and teaching and learning strategies. We look forward to having you on again.
Thank you. I hope it's helped people. Thank you.